One.
Good morning or afternoon, as the case may be, citizens. Welcome to Escambia Citizens Watch Live. I'm John Singley, your host today, and we have a very special guest who've joined us on this windy, rainy, kind of ugly-looking day. Lieutenant Eddie Elmore of the Florida Hghway Patrol has come over from his home or his headquarters, I think, in Bay County, to be with us and talk about pedestrian safety. We're going to take a look with the lieutenant at the statistics and the data, the facts surrounding pedestrian safety in the city of Pensacola and Escambia County. It's been a trending topic on social media, and we want to learn a little bit more about it through the help of the lieutenant here. So welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You come up to Pensacola quite often, you've been telling me. Right?
Yes, sir. I come over here about once a week.
You're a little bit about, so the people can know you as one of us who wears a special uniform here. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from? How long you been doing this?
Born and raised right there in Jackson County. Just like your typical warm-blooded American. As soon as I got out of high school, I went to the Marine Corps. Done it, 8 years in the Marine Corps, active in reserve time, done several deployments over to the Middle East and to Europe and Kosovo during 1999. So, went to college, graduated from Troy State, and found my employment home with the Florida Hghway Patrol.
Former Marine, you're in former Marine country here in Escambia County.
Yes.
Seems like every other neighbor I meet here is a former Marine or a serving Marine, quite frankly. So it's a great tradition of service in Northwest Florida. And well, good for you, sir. So you've been in the Florida Hghway Patrol now some time. You joined up out of the Marine Corps.
Yeah, in 2003, after I got back from Iraq, I found my home at the Florida Hghway Patrol, and I've been here ever since.
Where has the patrol sent you in your service?
My first duty station was actually here in Pensacola, which I truly love, but home calls you back. So I eventually went back home.
And you are a unique in the military. We would call you a collateral duty officer, meaning you're a patrolman, trooper, but they've also asked you to be a public information officer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Typically, my day starts out as soon as I wake up. I'm being briefed on anything that happened over the night. If I didn't get phone calls during the night, with our troop encompasses 10 counties across the Panhandle. So from the Chattahoochee River all the way over to the Alabama line, and that belongs to us. So we have a lot of stuff going on all through the night. So my phone rings pretty frequently, whether it's road blockage on a major roadway, or if it's a significant arrest, drug arrest, or whatever, pursuits, fugitives being apprehended. So we have a lot of stuff that goes on within these 10 counties.
And you mentioned road blockages. I'm going to ask you something about that. I was looking at the Florida Hghway Patrol website here recently, and I noticed they have a very interactive little map that goes on there where you can see traffic incidents and accidents throughout the state of Florida. And sometimes I know in my family, before we get on I-10, we're always wondering, I hope it's not blocked down there at such and such a place. So what are we going to do? But you can actually go there. Is that correct? You can see real time.
Yes, sir. You can see real time. That website is actually connected into our CAD. We also have a Twitter page, which is FHP Panhandle. I run that page, and I try to keep significant road closure, stuff like that, up to date on my Twitter page as well.
Well, that's a great service for you. You live over in Bay County.
Yes.
Bay County's and its neighboring counties have been in the news recently, and not always for good things. The hurricane did quite a number over there. Tell us a little bit about the Florida Hghway Patrol and the response that your agency provided.
Our agency, in any natural disaster area, our agency sends in troopers, and we do everything from search and rescue operations, traffic control operations, to cutting trees out of the road operations, which is something that we've kind of adopted over the last couple of years. Traditionally, it was just common knowledge. If we have a storm coming in, troopers say, hey, bring your chainsaws to work. So that has actually encompassed we have chainsaw teams that will actually go out and clear some of these roads, most especially in this last hurricane that we had. Because if the roads are blocked, EMS can't run, resources can't come into the area to help get back stabilized and get people that actually need help the help that they need.
So you really carry in circumstances like that a chainsaw in your vehicle?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And you're sort of driving around, and you might have an emergency call, and you see a road a tree blockage. Then you have to make a command decision over whether to cut that tree or go respond.
Yes,
right.
And sometimes, most especially during the hurricane that we just had, we actually had to cut into our own people so that they could get out. It took me about 48 hours just to cut out of my house and get on the road where we can actually start responding.
Right.
So, and we know that as an agency, so we bring in teams from across the state. We call them our quick reactionary force.
From the patrol.
Right. So we mobilize them. We had them mobilized in Tallahassee and in Jackson County so that we could respond when it happened.
Well, that's you see the pictures from all the damage over there, and you hear about everybody pulling together. But I think that's another example of the service that Florida Hghway Patrol. You're basically, if it needs to get done, you guys are going to take care of it or get the necessary resources.
Yes, sir. We're going to do anything that needs done so that we can keep our community and the visitors and the Floridians safe.
Well, for anybody who's watching us live here today, you're certainly welcome to ask Lieutenant Elmore questions or provide any comments to him, and we'll be on the lookout for those. And if we see some, we'll certainly get them over to him, and he can talk to you, sort of address your whatever question or comment you may have. Lieutenant, this is a holiday week. It has been here for a couple of days. During the holidays, what's a typical day look like for you? Do you get to take any time off? Or
typically, not so much. We know that this is the holiday season, so we actually limit our leave, make sure that we've got enough staff out on the road to be able to respond to the influx in traffic that we're going to have out on the roadways.
It's the festive season, we used to like to call it, and that always implies that people are, partying, or they're up late, or whatever the case may be. But knowing that the Florida Hghway Patrol and all of law enforcement, quite frankly, are out there to help us get home safely, I think is really, really important. And it's like the military. You guys do some of your best work when other people are taking time off to be with your families. And I speaking for many citizens here, we appreciate your sacrifice and your service, sir, under those circumstances. The issue today is pedestrian safety and pedestrian accidents. In Pensacola, recently this fall, there was a horrific pedestrian fatality where a young mother and her child, standing on the street corner attempting to cross Cervantes Avenue over here, were struck by what turned out to be a fugitive on the run. And both of these citizens, the mother and the daughter, are deceased. The fugitive was later apprehended and is being, I think, incarcerated, waiting for a court day now. But Lieutenant, one of the things we ask you to talk about over here today are what's going on with pedestrian safety in Escambia County, and to the extent that you have the numbers here over in the city, within the city limits too. Are we doing better? Is it getting worse? What is the Florida Hghway Patrol statistics tell you?
The statistics is pointing out that we're going to have an increase in pedestrian fatals in 2018. When you look at, we have to look not only at one county, but we have to look at all 10 counties and see what we're doing, what can we do better. And that's something that we ask ourselves all the time. Like just in 2017, we had 115 total fatals, not just pedestrian fatals. So we have to look at the whole numbers as well, and we have to even get down into the pedestrian fatals. we've kind of identified a couple of areas that have been a little more prevalent to having pedestrian fatal crashes, and just not even fatal crashes, but SBI crashes, which is serious bodily injury crashes that will lead to a fatality.
I see. Yeah, I would imagine there's more of the bodily injuries than there is of the fatalities. Mm-hmm. It seems like every so often, under the circumstances, one or more of them will get more headlines than the other.
Correct.
And people will pay real close attention to this entire issue. And we thought that during the holidays, this might be a good time to raise more awareness and having you come establish what the actual facts are. I was looking over one of the spreadsheets you showed me here earlier today, and it looks like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like I think there's 26 counties in Florida with populations greater than 250,000, 300,000 is the number. What was the number?
200,000.
26 counties, populations greater than 200,000. Escambia County looks like it's right in the middle in terms of all fatalities, bicycle fatalities, motor vehicle fatalities, pedestrian fatalities. And you would imagine some of the larger counties have bigger numbers.
Correct.
But Pensacola is not the safest in terms of fatalities of large counties, but it's not the worst either.
Right.
And that implies there's always room for improvement.
Yes. And that is something we look at, anytime that, most especially from a law enforcement officer standpoint, when you look at pedestrian violations, that's one of the last things that we want to do is to write somebody a pedestrian citation for not crossing the road properly or crossing the road at an improper location. Florida Department of Transportation has worked very hard on, and they look at these numbers too when they do their safety meetings. And I personally talk to their safety team, and we always come together with what can we do better. And what we have started to do better is do more pedestrian enforcement, most especially in Escambia County over on the Mobile Highway area. We see that there's a cluster of pedestrian crashes there that we've kind of located, and we've started actually doing pedestrian enforcement action on those pedestrians. We've asked them. I've even personally stopped and asked them, "Why did you cross here?" Well, it was closer. I didn't want to walk. I didn't want to walk 15 yards down to the crosswalk and cross properly. Yeah,
it seems to me that that's pretty hazardous.
Yes.
For the troopers to cite pedestrians. I mean, you got to get out of the vehicle in a busy area.
Yes.
And speak with the person. I just can't imagine what you folks have to go through when you're out there in these busy areas out there and cars are whizzing by in all different directions. That's that's kind of like we used to say in the military, you need to have your head on a swivel.
Absolutely.
Yes. You mentioned Mobile Highway in particular. Are there any other locations that seem to be problematic for pedestrian safety?
Anywhere that you have a higher increase in pedestrian traffic, you're going to have a higher increase in conflict with other vehicles. And Mobile Highway and Davis up near the interstate is the two locations, but more prevalent is on the Mobile Highway area.
Yeah, does Blue Angel Parkway seem to strike you as an area that you see more of these incidents?
Yes.
And that's kind of a little bit further out.
Yes. And we have talked to Florida Department of Transportation, their safety team, and they've put a lot of extra lighting on Mobile Highway. They have created another crosswalk there on Mobile Highway near the Walmart there. So they've really put a lot of effort into making it as safe as possible for pedestrians in that area.
Lieutenant, when you see these pedestrian incidents and you look at the data, what contributing factors seem to jump out at you? I mean, what you hear people talk about, well, they were pedestrians wearing dark clothes, so it was their fault, or the driver was distracted,
Mm-hmm.
so that it was the driver's fault. What jumps out at you as an investigating officer?
One of the main causations of these pedestrian crashes, probably 95% of them, they're not happening in the crosswalk, which is a big indicator to us that there's a problem within this area, which leads us to do more enforcement actions on the pedestrian violations. You know, honestly, would be dereliction in our duty. And it is something I do not want to do, is to write a pedestrian violation citation. Could be up to, $60 to $100 just because somebody crossed the road improperly. But when you look at the big picture and individuals, family, fathers, sisters, brothers are being killed by that violation, you have to put that back in perspective.
Yeah. Do you, for those of you who are watching today, if you have any questions or comments for the lieutenant, we'll be glad to take them. Just put it on your Facebook comment section. And as they come up, we'll post them up, and we'll ask the lieutenant to respond to you. Crosswalks. Now, again, I know you're not a traffic engineer, but you are the tip of the spear, quite frankly. Yes. You're out there on the pavement where these things occur. People have told us, we've seen, like on the bases out here, they have lighted crosswalks, meaning they've got these little lights in the street, in the pavement. And when a pedestrian wants to cross, he hits a button, or she hits a button, and the lights flash, and the drivers supposedly can see this from a pretty good way, and it warns them. And I'm going to ask you your opinion here, and that's okay if if you want to. I don't know if the agency has an opinion, but do those lighted crosswalks? Do you think those are worth the time and money to install them? I would
honestly, if for us, as far as safety goes, you can't put a price on safety when it comes to making sure these individuals are safe. So anything that will help illuminate the pedestrian, I think would be a good thing.
Lieutenant, we've just gotten a comment in from one of our viewers, and he asked sort of a three-part question here, and I'll run it by you, and you can tackle it as you see fit. He's asking about pedestrian or incident hotspots on Pine Forest Road, Roberts Avenue, and railroad crossings.
Okay. I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with the area. I'm not familiar that it's become a hotspot for pedestrian crossings. I know there's a lot of housing developments that are going into that area, new housing that's been developed. So it's something that we're going to have to continue to watch. But as far as being a hotspot for pedestrian traffic, I'm not aware of it. I am aware of some incidents in the past couple of years that's happened out there. Some of it is still active investigations that are going on. So, but Pine Forest area is an area that we watch frequently. But as far as a hotspot goes, I'm not familiar.
It is a growing area, all the way out through Beulah, through there, headed out toward Alabama.
Right.
Boy, you're right. I just saw the other day how many new homes have been pedestrians and for teenagers, sort of two different groups there.
There's a couple. One, stay out of the roadway outside of crosswalks. Once you become in the roadway, you're actually competing with vehicle traffic. So you want to stay out of the roadway as much as possible. Utilize the safety, the crosswalks, and make sure if you know you're going to be out walking along the roads, make sure you wear bright clothing.
Right. Yeah. My wife puts a reflector vest on me when I put the dogs out at night to walk. She says, if you're not going to take care of yourself, I'll take care of you. That's what wives do. So,
and the military's got it. has got it good because, in the military, they require anybody that's going to
Oh,
be
yeah.
walking to have PT reflective belts on. So they they can have more strenuous rules than what we can, and they can enact it a lot quicker as well.
Railroad crossings, or as we use, this is a military term, but all my military viewers will understand is lollygagging on the railroad tracks.
Okay.
Just hanging out. Is that a big problem?
Not locally that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I know if we see it, anytime that you're trying to traverse a railroad track, you need to stay off of them because you never know when that crossing guard's going to come down. So allow enough room so that if a train comes, that you're not in conflict with that train.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of that. Every once in a while around here, you read about somebody struck by a train walking or whatever, playing near the railroad tracks over there in Scenic Heights area, that sort of where the railroad tracks run over there. And now this was a topic I wanted to talk to you about. This sort of ties into pedestrian safety, but it is a topic that I've just always strikes me the wrong way. I'm not sure if it's my military service or my upbringing, but hit and run incidents.
Right.
We seem around here to read a lot about hit and run incidents. What's your take on that? I mean, what's really happening here, Lieutenant?
Well, a lot of the problems is once somebody gets involved in a crash, they might have something else going on, like a suspended license. They've let their insurance lapse. And a lot of times what we've seen is they're not even at fault during the crash, and then they still leave the scene. So what happens is now they have a charge against them, even though they weren't at fault. So there's a lot of mitigating circumstances why people leave the scene, but it's something you have to remember that if you leave the scene, even if you are at fault, that's an additional charge. Most especially if somebody gets injured, that's a felony.
I notice it seems like you resolve these. Sometimes they resolve sooner rather than later, but you seem to resolve most of these.
A lot of them we do, and it's mainly because individuals see something and they say something. We rely heavily on witnesses during hit and run investigations. Once we get to a scene, we have a lot of evidence to collect, physical evidence. We look at cameras from different types of businesses nearby. But it all comes down to a lot of these hit and runs are solved because witnesses aren't afraid to come forward and tell us what they've seen. They've got the tag numbers. They've got a description of the driver, which helps us tremendously.
We have another question for you from one of our viewers, and this gets back to your experience with the crosswalks and pedestrians. And their question is, where you see sort of a hot spot of pedestrian incident, you mentioned Mobile Highway.
Right.
But their question is, does this mean that more crosswalks would make a safer neighborhood? And they mentioned Gulf Beach Highway and Blue Angel Parkway, for example.
Okay. It really depends on the area. Anytime that you can keep individuals from, if there's a specific location where everybody's crossing at, it's something that we can look at and say, yeah, we need more crosswalks at this location. And you also have to look at what's driving them. What's driving those pedestrians to that side of the road versus the other side? So, case in point, if there's a Walmart or anything that is driving pedestrians to cross the road there, it's something that Florida Department of Transportation looks at frequently when they're installing these crosswalks.
So when you complete an accident investigation, all of the information is collected by the Florida Department of Transportation.
Yes.
And that's used to decide whether more crosswalks or things could be.
Yes. Anytime there's a cluster of crashes, say, just for an example, Mobile Hghway and Tonawanda, if there is a cluster of pedestrian crashes there, Florida Department of Transportation have safety teams. They look at what's causing them. We look at as far as enforcement and education for that area, what could we do better, which is something we looked at, doing pedestrian enforcements on Mobile Highway. We've seen a little cluster. So what's our rebuttal? How do we stop that as far as our agency mission and our objectives and goals?
How does can a citizen have input to that? I mean, if we wanted to, send something to the Florida Hghway Patrol that says, please put in a new crosswalk here, how would that work?
Essentially, that's outside of our mission, but we will most definitely, if anybody wants to send me an email, I will get it to the correct.
I didn't mean to open up your email inbox, Lieutenant.
Right,
but,
to get that to it. But, Florida Department of Transportation, they could always call them, get their contact information, and get that information to the right people.
Does slower vehicle speeds equal greater pedestrian safety in your experience?
In my experience, slower vehicle speeds, it really comes back to the driver responsibility in the area. Most of the speed limits that I've seen, even around Pensacola, Escambia County, and across our troop, they're appropriate.
Yeah, I think a lot of study goes into that. They just raised the speed limit on I-110 over here recently, and I don't know that we've seen a spike in incidents or things over there.
Right. In any time that happens, we watch that very closely to see if there's a negative impact. And then if we have to come back and revisit it and talk to the Florida Department of Transportation safety team, and trust me, they're aware, they're watching it as well.
That's good to hear. Slower speeds and pedestrians, there's another factor I need to get your input on also, and that is distracted driving.
Yes.
And I will just throw my 2 cents in here as a twice daily dog walker in my humble neighborhood over here. I'd say in the last 2 years, I've seen an increase in the number of people who are driving down this street, which is a 35 mile an hour speed limit, with their heads down.
Yes.
This car going straight ahead, heads are down, hands on the wheel. And I got to believe that this is we're seeing more and more of this. What does your data tell you?
And once again, you have to look at where's technology going, where's it been, and where are we at now? Florida legislator has been continually looking at this law to see if they need to toughen it up or change it. I think it's going to be on the books again for 2019 as far as making it a primary stop versus secondary. So what do I mean by secondary stop? The way that the law is written now is they have to be, an individual driving a vehicle has to be doing something other than texting before a law enforcement officer can stop them. So what does that mean? Say if they're traveling outside their lane, they're speeding, which typically is what
that's
they
what
do.
happens, right?
And when individuals are texting, they actually mimic impaired drivers. So right now, where the law stands is they have to be committing another offense before we can stop and write them a citation or do any type of enforcement action for the event of texting.
Yeah, that's interesting that a distracted texting driver, their vehicle actions mimic a impaired driver.
Yes.
Right.
And essentially, if you look at it, they're not even looking at the roadway. Right. They're doing everything else but driving.
Well, we've covered a lot of territory here, Lieutenant, and I know the time you spend in here talking to us and all the folks on Escambia Citizens Watch is time you could also be out enforcing and helping motorists out on the great highways of our state. So thank you again. But one more pitch for the Florida Hghway Patrol. If anybody's watching and is interested in becoming a highway patrolman,
yes,
how do they go about that?
We have a website. It's beatrooper.com. That is our recruitment website. And we are hiring here locally in Escambia County. 10 years ago, if you asked anybody if they want to join the Highway Patrol, they'd be like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be sent to Miami. We've changed our hiring processes. So we're at a mentality now that if we can hire local, they're going to stay here local, and they're going to have very long 25, 30-year career locally.
So it's www.beatrooper.com. And I got to tell you, I sneaked a peek at that yesterday, and it's got all the information you'd ever want, just like joining the military. It's got everything you'd ever need. It's got an online application, I think, on there.
It is a one-stop shop for recruitment.
Well, good. And I hope that you get all the, the Florida Hghway Patrol gets all the resources it needs. When you're out there with your family on the roads going somewhere and there's trouble of any kind, there's no more welcome sight than a Florida Hghway Patrolman driving up to give you an assist. So I think the service you provide the citizens, and this is a long history. I know it's 1930s.
1939.
Right. It's something we can all be very proud of, and our legislatures should support the Florida Hghway Patrol. Make sure they're paid what they're worth, and they have the resources to do what they need to do. So, Lieutenant, before we leave here today, is there any last message you'd like to give the folks out there before you leave?
Just if you're going to be driving, focus on driving. That's all you need to do when you're behind the wheel.
Sounds so simple.
It does. It does. But it's beginning to be harder and harder for individuals they're out there driving on our roadways, and everybody sees it.
Well, that's one more thing there, and then we'll call it a day. But forgot New Year's Day is coming up, and the law enforcement, sometimes you hear about the sobriety checkpoints and things like that. Does the FHP have anything like that planned in our area that you can talk about?
We do. We're moving to the next couple of weeks is saturation patrols. So we're going to put a whole bunch of troopers in an area, and their goals and objective is to monitor, make sure that they're stopping individuals that are driving patterns are impaired drivers.
I gotcha. So if my headlight is burned out, I better get it fixed in a hurry, lest I get checked.
Yes, sir, because we're going to be out.
Lieutenant Eddie Elmore from Panama City, born and raised in Jackson County, former Marine, now 15 years with the Florida Hghway Patrol. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming over to see us.
Well, we appreciate you.
And if you look him up on the internet there at the FHP website, you can find his email. And if you got any suggestions for him, let him know.
Let me know.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.